Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance Audit Tender Administration Committee Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, 12 o'clock to order. Order of business. Number one, call to order. So done. Number two, declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No, thank you. Number three, approval of agenda. I understand that there's a request from Finance Manager Betty French to add an item, I believe, under new business. Is that correct, Betty?
Yes, if we could add the council grants, the two grants that were discussed last night to the agenda. I just wanted to bring forward some clarification from the grants bylaw. Thank you, Chair.
I'll just reference. I will just add number 10, new business, and then number 11, adjournment. Thank you for that, Betty. Okay. Something we've all been waiting for. A draft procurement bylaw, number 4. It's been circulated. Trust committee and has had time to review it. I'm sure there's been a lot of time and effort put into this on behalf of Betty and her team. And having said that, I'll pass it on to Betty to take us through this and initiate debate at our committee here. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have folks had a chance to have a look at the bylaw? Because depending on how much you've looked at it, I can go through it briefly or go through it a little bit more in depth. Jackie, if you can put it up on the screen for me there, I'd appreciate it, please. So the background to this bylaw was we started with a bylaw that was updated back in 2020. And my understanding was it actually came to this committee at that time, but it was, for various reasons, was not forwarded to council. So that's where we started, was the 2020 bylaw. The environmental and sustainability folks had a look at it and added procurement pieces. And then we have gone through it and tried to add as much as we can as far as definitions, clarity, just adding a lot more information in there. So as I've become aware of different questions people have, things that were unclear, we've tried to address those in this bylaw. One of the most significant changes is the authorization limits that are in there, but there is some basis for that, so we'll talk to that further when we get in there. So it starts off standard initial pieces, the title, the applications, the purpose. That's fairly straightforward. The bylaw objectives. We've added quite a few additional definitions, even so much as what does the money piece mean? Like folks have said to me, well, is it before taxes or after taxes? And this clearly says when we refer to a limit, if something is everything over $25,000, that's $25,000 in Canadian funds before taxes. We address the emergency procurement. We've defined what environmental sustainability is. We've defined a joint purchasing arrangement or a buying group. We get into what an expression of interest is, definition for request for information, pre-qualification, request for proposal, request for quotation, request for tender. RFX is a catchphrase term that would refer to any of these RF somethings. So an RFP, an RFQ, that's a generic term for all of them. Single sourcing, which is the use of a non-competitive procurement process to acquire goods or services from one specific supplier, even though there may be more than one. Sole sourcing is if there only is one. Standing offer is defined there. Sustainable procurement. The sustainability pieces refer to total cost of ownership, total cost of procurement. We've defined unbudgeted, so an unbudgeted item is something that was not budgeted, but there is room in the budget. If we reallocate some money, there is room in the budget to cover that. Then it gets into a piece about separating the roles and the role of council, and defining council has the ultimate authority for all expenditures, but they delegate this authority through the approval of budgets or by specific resolution or bylaw. And budgets approved by council shall constitute authorization for the purchases, services, and construction necessary to carry out that work. So that's an important piece to look at carefully. The code of conduct refers to the city's employee code of conduct and the council code of conduct. Some of it is repeated here just for clarity and ease of reference. Similarly to the conflict of interest piece. Then we get into roles, responsibilities, authorities. There's a number of responsibilities for the CAO, manager of finance, department heads. And then we have procurement methods. This still has to go through legal. I'm not sure what kind of adjustments they may make, but we have referred here to various purchasing acts that we're part of, and saying that if we have things that are not part of these particular acts because they have restrictions on favoring local suppliers, but where we're not bound by those, we will look at local suppliers wherever possible. We would like to be able to reserve the right to participate in joint purchasing arrangements or buying groups with federal, provincial, or other municipal governments if they're deemed to be in the city's best interest. And sometimes buying groups can get us better deals or faster deals because a larger organization than us has already gone through the competitive procurement process. And I have been asked by managers, can we participate in this? And at the moment, we don't specifically have anything in our bylaw about this, so this would allow us to do that if we deemed it to be in the city's best interest. And sometimes these things are very, you have to act quickly to be able to get a buy-in, and if it went through committee and council, it just delays that, so the offer may not be available. That's why we've put that in there. I know one of the purchasing staff was on a recent webinar with the Canoe, I think it was Canoe Buying Group, and they came away with a very good impression of that one. Is that the one that's with the
FCM.
the Federation? Yeah. So
Federation
they were
Canadian
quite pleased with that one.
Yeah, it's a national procurement.
So this would allow us to participate in those sorts of things.
Just excuse me, Betty, are you talking on 10.2?
Yes.
Okay.
The next one is reserving the right to participate in standing offer agreements, again, with various levels of government if they're deemed to be in the city's best interest. And the only one there I've come across so far is Rory has asked about that to do with computer purchases, being part of a standing offer. And that's defined above. The next one gets into the total cost of ownership and total procurement value. So the environmental folks are wanting us to look at the whole package, not just what the cost is today, but if we look at the other factors that are also involved in the procurement as much as possible. And then we get into 10.6, which defines the levels that are being recommended. And I got these by going back and looking at what was recommended to the Finance Committee back in 2002 back in 2020 when this was looked at, as well as by looking at some other municipalities. And we looked at a number of different ones. We tried to look at municipalities of a similar size. I have preference for St. Thomas. That's the one I'm familiar with, and it's a very similar sized city to here. So a lot of what I've had in here, I've drawn from there. We also looked at Moncton and Whitby and a few others. There's a schedule with some comparisons that we'll come to. So the recommendation is to consider anything under $10,000 to be a low dollar procurement. So that will be done at the discretion of the department, and they can solicit a minimum of 3 bids when possible, but this is not requiring that. The next level is an invitational competition. That's our basic 3 quotes, so between $10,000 and $50,000. The department has the authority to administer the procurement process, and they would get the 3 quotes. The requests must be in writing, the responses must be in writing, the award is made to the highest scoring competitive bidder, and copies of the quotes and contracts that result are kept on file in accordance with the city's retention bylaw. And the next level is for goods and services over $50,000. And that is where we have a request for quotation. And this is done through the purchasing department. The RFQ is advertised on our website or where we may deem it to be, but at the moment it's advertising on the website. The award is made to the highest scoring compliant bidder. Copies of the quotes and contracts are kept on file, and a purchase order is issued to confirm the award. The next section is request for tender, and that's for construction projects, $50,000 and over. The same sort of items are there. And then a request for proposal isn't necessarily tied into a specific dollar value. That's when we're asking for more information from the bidders that we don't necessarily have a solution in mind. We're looking to them to provide some additional information about the solution. Then the non-competitive procurement is when we're doing single sourcing or sole sourcing. So there's a summary here then of how that would all fall into being. So under the $10,000, low dollar, purchase order is optional, the department approves it. 10 to 50,000, that's the invitational competition, 3 quotes, purchase order is optional, the department approves it. 50 to 100,000, public competition, RFX or tender as appropriate, purchase order is now required, and it's approved by the department and the CAO. Over $100,000, public competition, purchase order is required, and it comes to council for approval. If it's unbudgeted, so that means it wasn't specifically budgeted, but we can find money in the budget to cover it, it would go through the low dollar value procurement and the optional purchase order, and it's approved by the department. If it's between 10 and 50 and unbudgeted, it now needs to be approval of the CAO, so that is a lower threshold than above. And unbudgeted over $50,000 has to come to council for approval. A change order, that's within budget, but less than $50,000 can be approved by the department head. Change orders between $50,000 and $100,000 within budget, approved by the CAO. Change orders greater than $50,000 need to come to council. If the change order is not within budget, then it follows the unbudgeted piece up here. Be those same rules there. Single or sole sourcing, under 10,000, department and CAO, greater than 10,000 is council. And we have a piece on emergency procurement. Purchase orders, and this gives some reasons why we would use a purchase order. My municipal background, we didn't use purchase orders, although I certainly saw times it would have been really good to use a purchase order. And then I come here and purchase orders are used for a lot of things, and I've seen instances where I see the purchase order making it cumbersome, adding extra red tape, slowing down the process. So there's nothing here saying you can't use a process, but a purchase order, sorry. But if it's greater than $50,000, you have to use a purchase order, and then under $50,000, it's the department's choice. But this gives them some things to look at, to think about, well, why am I doing a purchase order? What do I need it for? And there's certainly times when you do need it. So if you want to be tracking something in your budget, you would use a purchase order. To help you with your budget monitoring, you would use a purchase order. There are situations where a vendor wants a purchase order because that gives the person making the order the authorization to be buying on behalf of the city. It provides documentation, documentation of the purchase, and it can streamline the invoice payment process. So if it's an advantage to use the purchase order, absolutely. If it's going to slow things down, maybe we don't need it. I've discussed this piece with our auditors to get their feedback on that, and they primarily look at the invoice as their source of authorization for the process. We have our invoices that are approved, and they're the documentation piece there. I know especially at year end, purchase orders can be really helpful in helping us set up accruals because we know what's been ordered and what we don't yet have an invoice for, so we can concentrate on looking at those. There's a flow chart here to help folks decide if they want to do a purchase order or not. It's been suggested maybe we should pull this piece out and have it in a procedure document as opposed to the bylaw, but at the moment it's been left in there. Contract management and supplier performance is managed by the departments. We have a piece on records retention and access to information, section on the sustainable procurement, and bylaw review every 5 years or at an earlier date as deemed necessary. And then there is this piece here on the approval authority. And some limits have been dropped down. A lot of limits have been increased to provide more flexibility for the departments in getting what they need to get their job done. And the basic premise behind this is that we have an approved budget that approves the categories of spending. We have an approved capital budget with the projects in there. And we have the resolutions of anything over $100,000 that's been approved by council. And this is giving them the authority to approve the purchase orders and the invoices. And at the bottom here, all corporate invoices over $500,000 must be co-signed by the department's director, CAO, or finance manager. And finance manager is mainly in there because we don't have all the directors in place now. Once we have 3 directors, I don't think I'll need to be in there. All corporate invoices must be signed by 2 authorizers, one of whom has an authorization limit in excess of the invoice amount, and all purchase orders require 1 authorization with a limit in excess of the PO amount. And this is our little chart here that gives a comparison of some other municipalities as far as their limits. So this is the current piece over here with Charlottetown, where $25,000 and over essentially goes out for tender and requires council approval. Summerside, some of the pieces are lower, but it only goes to council if it doesn't have a budget and it's greater than $50,000. St. Thomas, if it's over $250,000, it goes to council. Otherwise, it's dealt with by the department head or the department head in conjunction with the finance head. Moncton, council approves anything over $150,000 for operating, anything over $500,000 for capital. Whitby, everything seemed to be within the department or the CAO or treasurer unless it was over the trade agreement level. And I don't have details what over the trade department level is, but even over $100,000 here, it still says department head and treasurer. Peterborough had it goes to council if it's over $100,000. So the recommendations are over here, just summarizing what it was before. So anything over $100,000 goes to council. Unless it's the single or sole sourcing, then it's $10,000. So this is coming to you for information today. It has not yet gone through legal. There may be some legal things that they're making changes to. I have not got feedback from all of the managers. The ones I have gotten feedback from, that has been incorporated into this document, with the exception of something from the manager of economic development, who gave me an example of another municipality that had a nice paragraph in there about some exceptions. And there are certain things that it makes sense to have accepted from this policy. And there's pieces about events and that sort of thing that are in that piece. So that will be in the next version of this that comes out once it's been through legal. Any comments or questions?
Thank you for that run through, Betty. First pass, it seems to be, anyway, seems to be very good. Having said that, I'll open it up to the committee. If there's anything that's jumping out at anyone that they want to have a question or make a comment. All good. Just for clarification, Betty, I was just wondering, like on, just for my own, I guess, understanding, on the definitions, like on 5.4, when it talks about sole sourcing, is the use of a non-competitive procurement process to acquire goods or services where there is only one available supplier capable of delivering the goods or services. So would that be an example of where either you or as a manager or department head would have that discretion or have that ability to
Okay.
decide on sole sourcing?
That is addressed down here where we talk about single or sole sourcing. So single or sole sourcing under $10,000 can be
Okay.
approved by the department and the CAO, and if it's over $10,000 by council.
Okay, great. Okay, right, correct. Okay, thank you. So, okay, Mayor Brown?
Yeah. So 10.1, page 13. Now, Betty, just to give you some context, we did have the province in. I think it was Laurie Richard that was in from the province's procurement department. I was trying to find their procurement act that they follow. When Laurie was given her presentation, that the province has a buy local, where if the local bidder is within 10% of the lowest bid, that that a decision could be made to allow to go local. That's my recollection of what was discussed. That was probably a couple of years ago. I know 10.1 talks about all purchases of goods, services, and construction, which are not governed by the Prince Edward Island Government Public Purchasing Act, Atlantic Trade and Procurement Partnership, and the agreement on internal trade shall be obtained from various vendors. Have you looked at the Provincial Procurement Act?
I have had a look at it. I haven't gone through it in really close detail. I know,
And I didn't see that in our proposed act. Now, I might have missed it, but
no, there's nothing specific in here with a percentage for buy local.
no.
I know there was something in I may not have included it in here. There was something in Summersides about buy local. I didn't
That was referenced by, it wasn't Laurie, it was someone that was at our meeting a couple of years ago. Yes.
I didn't think they were as high as 10%. I know I did have a percentage.
Yeah, I think
but
it
just
could have
don't
been
have it in here.
5% for Summerside, but could we find out?
Yes, absolutely.
So under the proposed purchase without authorization, I think currently it's 6,000, right? Where a manager can sign off. Like, I think we go back to the PO books they have out at Public Works. I think they have a book of 100, and they're allowed up to what? 4,500, 6,000? Do you know, Betty?
The current low dollar value procurement is 4,000.
4,000. Okay, I thought it was 6,000. Okay. And you want to raise it to 10.
Yes.
Okay. And that would be the manager, director,
Manager.
supervisor, manager? Okay. And, I mean, I guess when you look at today's purchasing power, 4,000 is not a lot of money today when you look at it in the big scheme of things. And purchase order, like with, again, when I make reference to our family business, I'm in a blind trust, so I'm not speaking behalf of the business. We don't get purchase orders when we get anything. We do it all by e-transfer. So is that where we can move instead of purchase order, just get e-transfers to, and then there's a better accounting of it? Because I was on council, and I know Sue was around too, when we had a unfortunate situation where there was ABCE had to be called in to do a forensic audit because of just the misuse of funding, and there were a lot of levels of checks and balances put in. So with e-transfers, it's directly from the account for the city, whether it's the Department of Public Works, Parks, Recreation. Do they do that in St. Thomas? Like, could we look at e-transfers as a way of replacing POs?
Through the chair to the mayor, the purchase order is kind of like a pre-authorization before you make your expenditure. So the e-transfer would be a method of payment, but this is authorizing the purchase in advance. So it would be, for any of our tenders, any of our larger purchases, we always have a purchase order, and that has a level of approval. Sometimes one person can approve it, sometimes it needs more than one, depending on the type of purchase or the dollar value. So that's a document that's created in advance of the purchase. And in some situations, it is sent to the vendor. I don't think it always is, but it can be. It can be considered to be a binding contract that we've agreed to purchase, that they've agreed to provide at a certain price. And then when we receive the goods and receive the invoice, that invoice and the purchase order are matched up. So it's kind of an additional level of authorization, although often the person approving the purchase order is the same person who authorizes the invoice. So it is different than an e-transfer. No, we did not use e-transfers in St. Thomas, and that, I think, is a more informal way of doing your payments. We use a lot of direct deposit or electronic funds transfer in our payments, especially during COVID. That was encouraged because then you're not folding and stuffing and touching checks and invoices that you're then mailing out. And it's more efficient. It gets the money to the person faster. It can't get lost or damaged in the mail. So we like the EFT method of paying. And we have a more extensive authorization process here for payments than what I have seen in the past. So for a invoice to get approved, it gets approved by two people, and right now it has to be two people with a signing limit higher than the invoice. And I'm suggesting that we have two people sign it, but only one has to have a higher signing limit, and that's kind of to give Eleanor and Sue a bit of a break because they sign off on a lot of things. One of the main reasons in having two people sign it is to make sure that you always have at least two people involved in transaction. So if somebody orders it and signs off saying, yes, we received it, somebody else is the one that's giving the overall higher level of authority so that two people are involved. So it prevents somebody from ordering things that are for their own personal use. If you see weird things going through, the other person signing is going to be saying, well, what's going on here? So you have two people seeing at the invoice level. Then our invoices get processed through accounts payable. They're reviewed by a second person before they're posted, and then we create the payment batch, and then at the payment level, two people review it at the payment level and sign off, and then two people also sign off at the bank level. So a lot of people are looking at it along the way. So I think the issues that have happened in the past are more than covered here.
So, no, I understand purchase orders. It's a guarantee that you're going to purchase that. But I think companies are moving away from that because of now where you can set up an account with a company that it's direct deposit or it's an e-transfer. I'm just looking at, is there a need for purchase orders anymore with the systems that we have in place through direct deposit, through e-transfers, and there's a better accounting of those inputs, outputs when it comes to financial transfers. Is that something you want to look at?
Well, I've also heard it suggested in from more than one source that for smaller purchases, wherever possible, use a corporate credit card or a purchase card. And then it's all documented that way, and that streamlines the processes. It changes how easily things are approved, though. And I know in the previous policy, it kind of had one process was if it was done by credit card and another process if it was paid by check or EFT, whereas to my mind, a purchase card is just a method of payment. It's not a method of approval, it's a method of payment. So you still need to have appropriate approvals, but it does streamline the process by using credit cards, absolutely. And I think we do use credit cards quite well here.
Yeah.
And as part of looking at the authorization limits, I think the credit card limits needs to be looked at as well. We, on a regular basis, have folks applying to have a temporary increase of their credit limit because they want to make a specific purchase. Whereas I would look at it, what kind of credit limit do they need to do their regular day-to-day business so that we're not always bringing it up and pulling it down? And is there a reason to keep it as low as it is if they have a signing limit? And, you know, everything is there's checks and balances designed in the whole system. So let's give folks the tools they need to do their job, but make sure there's appropriate oversight.
I have some more questions.
I do have to excuse myself to return to work, but I will watch the rest of the meeting at a later time. Thank you. Thank you for that, Betty.
Thank you. So just to go through the ESG, environmental social governance, that's quite prominent in the private sector and becoming more and more an issue or a concern in public sector corporations or municipal governments. That lens is, I think, you do make reference to it in one of the sections. Is there other areas that we could put more of a focus on ESG?
I will talk to our environmental and sustainability folks again and just make sure they have everything they want to in here. They have had access to the document and have certainly added what they wanted to. But yes, that's an ever-evolving process too, so there may be more pieces. So we can look into that, absolutely.
And Mr. Chair, I know that there's always a concern about rising fuel prices, rising prices for everything that is related to fossil fuels, but it's quite evident that climate change and global warming is a fact, and we have to deal with it by looking at our use and purchase of fossil fuels. So if we can keep looking at that ESG as a not a beacon light, but an area that we want to concentrate on, it's up to municipalities to make this change to adapt to our changing climate. And if we don't start looking at this in a very serious way, or we're going to wait for the forest fires to happen here in the Atlantic region, we're too late. So that's why I just want to focus on ESG. I know my son is involved with the property investment firm in Toronto, and they look at ESGs as a way of, furthering their efforts to adapt and address the issue of climate change. So I'd really appreciate if you could pass that on or get their input. And the last question is, if we compare the procurement policy, which I think is 2 pages, to our procurement bylaw, I think there's a lot of work that you've done here, Betty, so I really appreciate that it's been done thoroughly, but those couple of questions I have about the 5%, 10% for local purchases, and on the ESG, I would like you to follow up on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Betty, just a question on procurement methods, 10.6B, at when we said award is made to the highest scoring compliant bidder. I'm assuming there's somewhat of a common template that's used on something like this in terms of grids. Is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is an evaluation template for each tender, and I believe it's published as part of the tender document. So when bidders are responding, they know what that evaluation template is.
And just on 12, the emergency procurement, and I'm thinking of Fiona, I guess, kind of when I asked this, I guess, does this, whatever enhancements or massaging may have been done with this, do you feel the cities will be in a better position to act on a Fiona in the event of, the disbursement of dollars?
Yes, that's exactly the type of situation that this particular paragraph is meant to address, so that we're not, our hands are not tied when we're trying to deal with a situation like that. Exactly.
All right. Respect the time, going to run with that. But Betty, yeoman's work, you and your staff on this. And I think, as it moves through and gets to council for another look, and again, will also give us at the committee level another opportunity if there's other things that come to mind and questions that come up. So again, thank you on that. And moving on.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order. So this is the only discussion, like, I thought she was going to get it checked at a legal and then come back here. Yeah, I think it has to come back here. Yeah, it has to come back here so we give a vote on a resolution. I just want to make sure that I have some other concerns that I'd like to bring up after the legal eyes have looked at it.
Yes, yeah, okay, of course, yeah. I guess I'm just thinking that, it's still moving in the right direction and a lot of positive things happening, and we'll continue, hopefully get it as good as we can get it. Great, thank you. So going to item 6, proposed budget schedule. Betty, I'll ask you to kind of take us through that and,
Excuse me,
and
Mr.
what
Chair,
the
I
kind of the
believe
changes are in terms of an attack this year for our budgeting process.
I believe the next item is to do with the procurement policy clarification.
Sorry. Correct. Number 5, procurement policy clarification. Sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
So this is like a transitional piece until we get the new procurement policy in place. And we're just looking for some clarification on how this is interpreted. So Jackie, if you can give me the screen again, please, I'd appreciate it. So this is our existing procurement policy. And it talks here about the $4,000 and then the $4,000 to $25,000 that are our existing pieces, and then it moves on to tenders where it's over $25,000. But then it keeps going without kind of defining exactly what is meant where. And the piece that's kind of tied us up is this piece right in here in 2.4G, where it talks about council awarding the tender. And it hasn't specified here that that's only if it's over $25,000. Now, if I go back up to the council report here, so this is a summary here of our current policy. And the common practice has been for, if it's less than $4,000, the department approves it. If it's between $4,000 and $25,000, the department approves it. And if it's over $25,000, it's a competitive public competition, it's a tender or an RFX, and council approves it. But I just was looking for clarification on, is that a reasonable interpretation of this, and can we continue that process? Or is it a lower method? And this came to light with the EDI training, RFQ, I think it was. So we had a competitive process. The winning bid came in at $3,400, which is lower than the $4,000 limit. But because the policy refers to council awarding tender, it was brought to the committee here and then to council for council to award that procurement piece. But when we talk here about council awarding the tender, what interpretation should we be using here? Is that over $25,000? Is that the way the committee would be interpreting that?
I'm looking at the value, if you just go back up, like I go back up here to your report. Where is it? Yeah, I'm just looking at the value. It's the value, 4,000 is with a purchase order or go out to tender. It's my understanding.
So if it's over $25,000, it comes to council for approval, and if it's under $25,000, it can be approved within the department.
25,000. That's my understanding. I mean, if I'm seeing it wrong, or any comments, Mr. Chair or Councillor Duran? Because it says,
Certainly at under 4,000 or under, I'm comfortable with the department choice. As for the 4 to 25, I'm on the spot here. I'm not sure what the Councillor Drown, do you have a thought on?
I have the same, I guess, reservation, just like it came last night to council for something under 7,000, we approved it, right? So why did it come here if it's 4 to 25? Like, I thought anything after 4, we would have to have no documentation on it.
See, what the current policy says is for between 4 and 25,000 shall be acquired by way of a minimum of 3 competitive bids. A public tender may be called for under 25,000 if it's deemed to be in the best interest of the city. And it does not address who approves it. It doesn't say it has to come to council. The piece where it says it comes to council is here, council awarding the tender. And even this piece, it's to do with returning the bid bond. It doesn't really say council has to approve the tender. What it says is, like, it alludes to council awarding the tender, but it only uses the term tender. It doesn't talk about RFP or RFQ or 3 quotes or anything else. It only says tender. But that's the piece that we're looking for clarification on. And I know managers have said, like, we do an awful lot of business between $4,000 and $25,000. And if they had to bring everything over $4,000 to council, like, it slows down their procurement process so much, because they have to wait for committee and wait for council, and there would be a lot of stuff that would be coming to council that isn't currently coming to
But
council, because the common practice has been and to only bring it if it's over 25,000.
But there's bidding, but there's a bidding process between 4 and 25, there can be, right?
Yes,
At the department.
there's 3 quotes.
But then anything over 25 to council.
Yes.
How's the committee feel with that clarity?
well, one thing I'm very happy about is that we're getting rid of this policy. This policy has been guiding us for how many years, and it's a 2-page policy on procurement, and then you wonder why we argue with each other about what we do with money in this chamber, because that policy is way outdated.
This becomes obsolete.
Yes, yes,
When
this-
we pass the new
Yeah,
one.
this goes in the round file, yeah.
But
after
when
we-
you think about, we have a $70 million operating budget, think of how many purchase orders we're making in there, and there would be a lot that come to council if everything over everything over $4,000 had to come to council. That's a lot.
Well, we've been doing it, if we were following the policy.
Our common practice, sorry,
Go ahead.
our common practice has been everything over 25,000 comes to council.
Well, leave it as is. You're the manager, and then you have your staff there that are the checks and balances. So if something goes wrong with, you didn't get 3 bids, and it's discovered somewhere down the line that this was missed, then that would be a administrative operational issue, not ours.
Okay, so
So-
25,000. So what's the process now then? Does this need to go to council for resolution?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, we would like this to go through council for final sign-off. This policy, because of its challenges, we want to be crystal clear in how we're operating versus like years of practice, what that has been. What we learned from BDO, if it's not explicit, then we need to get explicit with what we can and cannot do. So that's all we're endeavoring to do through this. So we'd like council to be able to affirm what we have here on paper, so it's clear for everyone in how we're operating. Thank you.
So just to throw that back at you, I'm of the understanding, and I believe there's support at the committee level, less than $4,000. It's just, business as usual, 4 to 25,000. There's 3 bids done within whatever the staff or the department thing. Anything greater than 25 goes to council.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, could I just ask, like, in the procurement bylaw, this will be addressed? Yeah, you know what? Let's just leave it till then. Like, are you thinking that it's going to take 6 months to get this procurement bylaw through?
I'm certainly hoping not.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, just put this back to council, it will just be another.
Are you in support of that, Councillor John? Do them together, because we dealt with that last night and another issue, whatever. If we can, I certainly would agree with that, support that, so you good with that, Betty? And CAO?
Well, through the chair, I think what we're looking for is something, just direction in the interim and confirmation. We leave here today and we still have our day-to-day things that we need to worry about before this procurement bylaw comes into place, and that's why we're just looking for this to get confirmed.
Yeah.
If this has been the practice for years and years, even though it's not explicit in the policy, then we just want it confirmed that this is what we're doing, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm advising in the interim, if, assuming I have the support of my committee, just to again throw it back at you, less than $4,000, it's business as usual. From 4 to 25,000, it's 3 bids. Anything over the 25,000 comes to council, and that's the understanding of the operations of expenditures of dollars till we have the formalities of our procurement bylaw and policy done, completed. Everybody good?
No, I think you're just opposite to what we said. We said, look, just leave it as is. I don't think we'll have that many tenders between that 4 to the 25. There are that many that come back to council? That come back,
There are that many, period. And the question is, do they need to come to council?
have they
or
been
not?
coming to council?
For the most part, no.
Okay, so it's a moot point. So why do we have to get it changed?
To
It should be in the policy.
For the most part, no, until recently, after the BDO report, we have been bringing these more through because the policy is not clear. So we've been trying to get council to sign off on everything to make sure that we're showing that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's. So what we're trying to do is just, again, get it affirmed by council. This is everyone's understanding, because I don't want it to come down to staff saying that staff are misinterpreting the procedural bylaw by not bringing things through to council like they should be. So that's why we're looking for this confirmation to happen. If we don't, we have nothing in the interim to say that from an operational point of view that we can do this. The policy is vague. It implies things should come to council, but it doesn't say things need to come to council. And this is the very loopholes that the BDO report was touching on, and criticism then comes our way in operations for not following. So this is us trying to get crystal clear direction of what we can operate within. This has been based on past practice. We're just affirming that that's what we're doing moving forward until the new bylaw comes into effect.
No, there's been no policy.
Just the
Turn-
bylaw,
turn your
once
mic
the
on.
bylaw comes into effect, that policy is no more. We're just dealing with the policy, or the, oh, I'm so sorry, the bylaw.
Again, Betty, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just are looking for clarity that the departments are authorized to approve procurements of less than $25,000 and that council approval is required for procurements over $25,000. So we don't need to get into the four and the between 24 and 25. It's just clarity that council only needs to see what's greater than 25.
Okay, Mr.
Thank
Chair, so Mr. Chair, through the chair to the manager. So since the BDO report was released, we discussed it, passed a resolution. We have been following this process since the BDO. That is, anything between 4,000, 25,000, 3 quotes, they all come back to council. Is that correct? That is correct? Because I think, Mr. Chair, I think that if we just leave the practice in place, which is, I think they're doing business as usual, let it go. Like, what do you?
But that's what they're saying. You know, some have been coming here, not all. So they want a distinct voice from the committee and council that they can do this up to 25,000. I think that's what they're trying to say, right? So
I understand.
that's what they want from us right now,
Yeah.
is to say, yes, you know, do your 3 quotes up to 25,000, and you don't have to come to council. So that's what I think.
And are you okay with that, Councillor Drum?
Sure, if they think that that's going to keep things rolling and there's checks and balances in place with the 3 quotes or whatever, and then when we go get this bylaw in place, it's going to go, the numbers are going to go up, right? So once it goes through legal, once council debates it, but as for right now, they just want clarification that they can do this up to 25,000
Yeah.
without coming back and saying, hey, you were supposed to do this way, right? So I'm okay with doing that.
So when it goes to council, we're all on board, right?
Yep, 3, just for less than 25,000, getting 3 bids and that's understood.
Yeah.
Good to go.
So we got a meeting coming up on Thursday. Get a resolution ready for Thursday. Can you do that? Sure. Good.
Somebody keeps filing on the agenda, it's not me.
You move it?
Sure.
Moved. I'll second.
Moved by Councillor Drong, seconded by Mayor Brown. Move the motion and I think you have it, Jackie. And great, thank you. Thank you for that, Betty. Moving right along. Betty, item 6, proposed budget schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just briefly speak to this. This is a little different than.
ACAO, Eleanor, go ahead.
Yeah. So what you have before you is a new proposed budget schedule for 24, 25. We blinked and we're right back into budget again. And So there are a couple things here that are being proposed. We're proposing to have both capital and operating budgets to be completed on the same timeline this year. And ultimately, the final budgets with this schedule are planned to go to committee and council in February for approval. Attached to the report is a summary of what the schedule would look like. So we're already in October, so departments are already considering and starting to work on their budgets, including a 5-year capital plan. Later on this month, we'll be posting to Charlottetown Hall. We're still formulating the questions, but there'll be questions available to the public. What would you like to see in the 2024-2025 budget? Also, at the end of October, in accordance with the grants policy, we'll be putting out the call for grant applications, and the deadline is November 30th. We'll be asking if the Federation of PEI municipalities would come in to council and do a presentation on taxation. And we have a formal agreement that we have with the province, the municipalities will be working on with the province in March of next year. So this will help prepare us in thinking and preparing for that. And then in November, it's proposed to have a 2-day committee of the whole workshop. And we're still formulating what the workshop will look like exactly. But the first day, we're thinking that it could be all the departments would be presenting to council, and committee of the whole is all the members of council, but in a more committee environment, so you can discuss and come up with new ideas. Each department will do a presentation on their existing programs and service levels, along with their capital needs and priorities. And within that, they'd be identifying some of the challenges and trends that they're seeing within their department, and then also highlighting the top 5 things that they'll be prioritizing for 2024-2025. There'll also be a discussion in there on the strategic plan and council's priorities for 2025, as well as a discussion about what council sees as the top 5 things that the city should be focusing on over the next year, so we can prioritize our budget accordingly. And then the second day, we're still figuring out what this will look like again, but we're proposing that be the opportunity for the public and the stakeholders to make presentations on budget, and opportunities for council members to ask questions as needed. And then end of November is when the grant applications are due. And then throughout December, based on what happened at the workshops throughout November and the grant applications received, administration will further work on the budget, and there'll be a lot of internal discussions about balancing budget and any cuts or things that need to be moved around. And then come January is when the draft budget would be taken to special finance committee meeting and a special council meeting. It's also when we would have our public open house to receive feedback in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. And then if all goes well, we hope everything comes through and budget is approved in February 2024. And that's what we're proposing.
Thank you, CAO. Eleanor, just curious, do you have any familiarity or knowledge of other municipalities using the dual approach, doing your capital and budget, or operating in capital at the same time? We're not reinventing the wheel on that, I expect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's pros and cons to both. And I know Betty and I, with different municipal experiences, more often has been the case with our experience of actually taking both together at the same time. And part of the rationale for that is police are probably the easiest example. So say in the police we find the money that we're going to hire 10 new police officers. Well, if we do that...
Excuse me, Deputy or CAO, Mayor Brown just walked in. The question I asked, just so he's in on your answer, I just asked the CAO her experience or familiarity with the municipalities doing both budgets at the same time, operating and capital, and she's just answering my question.
Sure. So like I had said, that there's pros and cons to taking both routes. But a real pro, and the example that I'm using is police. So say you found the money and you were going to hire 10 new police officer positions, 10 new police officers. There's capital impacts to that. They need police vehicles. And so if you do your capital first and then your operational afterwards, there's a lot of things that happen in that operational budget discussions that can actually impact the capital. So when you're moving them both at the same time, it allows you to adjust accordingly to what's being proposed in the budget. So that's why we're asking that both move simultaneously at the same time. Thank you.
Those, I know Councillor Drong and Mayor Brown have been around the table a long time. Either of you any experience on this process, on a dual, or has it always been the traditional?
Well, no, the reason we separated it, just like the province went first on it, they separated it because they wanted to get out early on tendering. So the capital budget is usually passed before our year end. That's the only issue I had with it, is that that allows your contractors to start bidding on these projects that we want to get done or get completed within that 12 months, which I think we don't always get 50% of the capital budget spent anyways, and that's starting early. Anyways, that's the reason, that's the history behind it. So I'm willing to start the budget process early and pass it earlier like other municipalities. I like to just keep spending the money until the end of the budget year. If you got it, spend it.
Okay, anything further to say on that?
No, I can see the benefit of getting the two, because a lot of times people, we don't really realize what we're doing right at the first, especially someone coming new in. Okay, capital, what goes in that? What goes in operational? How do you streamline for the next year? If there was discussions on both at the same time to see what could be put in what budget allotment, then, I'm sure it would help people as it would have helped me years ago. But now, for people starting out, it would give them some guidance, I would think. But like I said, if we can get in this starting in November and get this stuff done, it's going to help us for the next year, because we're going out to tender now on a couple of things I think we were looking at. So if we can get the budgets approved and get them in place, then we can move on with the business.
I'll ask Betty, assuming obviously you've been in concert with CAO Eleanor on this process, or wouldn't be probably in front of us here today, but do you have any comments that you'd like to share on the question, Betty?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like everything, there's pros and cons to everything, but I fully agree with what CAO Eleanor has said about doing the two of them together.
And if I could just ask, Sue, you recall back when I was in council, the budgets were always, the capital and the operation were always presented at the same time. That's my recollection. I know that over the years, it was changed to allow that get out for the capital as soon as possible. So, yeah, I see.
Okay, we go to... Okay,
Mr. Chair,
CAO?
if I may, since we're in committee and we can throw around ideas, one thing that we could think about, if the press is to get these RFPs and things tendering out for January, something we could ask to the province is actually changing the fiscal period for the municipality January to December.
No, don't go there.
Don't go there?
No, that's what we had. We were.
And it didn't work for you?
Well, what doesn't work is that when they gave our payments out for the collection of taxes.
Yeah.
See, again, if you go back to Alberta, Ontario, you collect your own property taxes. We have to go through the province, so there was always a misalignment.
Got it.
So
Okay, well, that's
this
fine.
took a long time to change this. So stay with the 31st deadline. And that's why it probably made easier. No, it wouldn't. It didn't matter because I think, again, going back to we were doing those capital budgets earlier with the old fiscal, what is it, January 1st to December 31st. Stay there. Don't move from that because all three levels of government are at that state or at that period of budgetary process.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
But, Mr. Chair, I know.
Question?
It's just, how much is this going to put on our staff? Like, this is a big roll around quickly, and I know, Betty, everything has to funnel up through to you. So staff have been accustomed to, maybe going end of November, mid-November, December, Christmas, then January start the budgetary process, do the capital, then do the, Mr. Chair, and then do the operational. Like, now you're moving the benchmark back, you're resetting your dates. I'm just wondering, is staff ready for it?
Well, fair question. Let Betty try and answer that, or CAO, or both of you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So although this is operation, I will say that discussions with staff started in September, and it was a consultative process with staff and asking if this is possible and if this is something that they wanted to try on for the first time, and everyone agreed that they would give it a go this year, and we'll see how it goes. So that was the commitment. So I think it was about the beginning of September we started those discussions to get ready for October. October for them is a working month of collecting and starting to build the budgets. Rubber really hits the road towards the end of November, which aligns with the timing that it used to be anyway. And that's because we're relying on council's input that comes out of those workshops that happen in November. So really, this year, we've started early to have enough prep time, to have good engagement with the community, to give the community a chance to come in and present. So it's not so compressed as it was last time around. So this spreads it out a little bit more. Everyone has a little bit more breathing space. And we just think, I guess that's the best way to put it. There's a bit more breathing space with how the process has been laid out this year versus what we went through last year. Thank you.
No, it sounds like, I can't certainly speak from experience or knowledge, but my sense of it as you talk about it and describe it in this discussion here, it's probably a thing that, 1 year is not going to be enough to give you, it's probably going to have to be looked at over maybe a 3-year period or, to get 1 year kind of the reset, then next year it'll be easier in the third year, and then, hit your stride, hopefully, perhaps on the reset. So I'd like to move on the agenda if I could, and go to number 7, and thank you, Betty and CAO for that, on monthly financial statements. Betty, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, included in your package there are the the financial statements for the 5 months ended October, I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? August 31st, 2023. So we're now 5/12 through the year, which is 42%. And if I see our operating revenue percentage there is sitting right at 42%, so everything is looking on track there. Our expenditures are all listed there, and for the most part, each area is roughly in the 35 to 40% range as far as percentage of budget spent, so things are looking as they should. We again have used the prior year surplus to balance our budget, which at the moment we have more revenue than we have expenditures, so We're not actually really using any of our budget except to show that we anticipate coming to a 0%, a zero basis at the end of the year. Similar situation for water and sewer. They've brought in 40% of their revenue. They've expended 28.6% of their budget. And again, we've adjusted the surplus to bring everything down to zero, down to break even. Any particular questions I can answer
I
for
do,
anyone?
Mr. Chair. Yep. If I look at
Mayor
police.
Mayor Brown?
Sorry, sir, Mr. Chair. It's about police services. What did you say their budget's at? It's 30, did you say 30? I'm looking right here. It's 35%?
They're at 35.36% of their budget.
Okay. And the reason I bring that up, Mr. Chair, is that, you know, we're talking about hiring an additional 6 police officers, and, you know, is there any funds available in their budget? And if not, so we would have to take it from somewhere else in the budget. And have you identified an area through the manager, through the chair to the manager?
Betty, is that too much of a question on the spot,
wanna
or is
reserve
it something to take away?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the chair to Mayor Brown. There has been no identified extra money. The money in the budget is all allocated for. The only area might be through the extraordinary expenditure piece that is not fully allotable. But my understanding is that that is saved for extraordinary items.
These are extraordinary times that we're in. So that's why it's an extraordinary expense.
Okay, just the question, Betty, just on the Fiona funding expenses and how that ebb and flow is going. I'm just wondering what the inflow is like.
We have submitted 3 claims to the province for the residential work that was done for Fiona, and I believe we have received payment for all of those. They're
Numbers, approximately?
I'll have to let you know that, because most of that has gone through the March 23 financial statements, because a lot of that work was done in March before that time frame. And what
Just is it something that next monthly meeting you could kind of maybe give us
I can do that.
a little accounting on?
And then the next piece is the non-residential claims, all the other work, the city's work. And we've put a claim into the insurance folks for that. We go to the insurance folks first, and then what they don't cover, we then send to the province under their disaster relief program, and that can be covered up to 80%. We have not yet got an answer back from the insurance, although most of the work is cleanup work, which would not be covered by the insurance. If it was, you know, for instance, damage to a building, that would be, but not the cleanup.
Could you maybe kind of combine those and kind of give us just a little, just an update on both, just what that looks like, what the expense has been, what the revenue is, what's outstanding?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll bring a summary of that to the next meeting.
Thank you. And are you done with your walkthrough, Betty? And if you are there any questions to Betty? We good? All right, thank you. Moving along, item 8, tenders, RFPs, RFQs. Betty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a summary of the open or unawarded or upcoming tenders, RFPs, RFQs. I know there was one that Councillor McCabe was asking about at the last meeting, but I was unable to find the one she was specifically looking at. But this information is all posted on the website. It may be that there's it was pulled together a few days ago and may not be 100% up to date, but this is what we have here, and it shows the deadlines. Somebody was asking at the last meeting about the number of bids received, so that's an easy piece of information to add. So we have another column in there letting you know just how much interest there was on a particular item.
Any questions to Manager Betty on RFPs, the RFQ updates? Thank you.
I do, sir.
Mayor Brown?
Just through the chair to Betty. Betty, again, this is why I go back to the capital budget. When you look at the Spencer Drive extension, I thought that was in the budget here. It says, so it's an upcoming, therefore it's not in the budget? Could you clarify that? I thought, yeah, no, Spencer Drive, it's right here, 3 million. So upcoming, has
So
he,
that-
has our
that-
chief,
My
Is it-
apologies.
has our chief engineer defined upcoming? Is that like, you don't do that work in the winter? We get a clarification on it?
Through the
Betty?
thank you, Mr. Chair, through the chair to Councillor, to Mayor Brown. Those are ones that are currently being worked on and have not been posted yet, but they are expected to be posted in the near future. As far as timelines, I can't give you an answer on that. That would be up to the chief engineer.
And then if we go to Seaview Boulevard, that's been canceled because the bids that come in were too high. And I know with the East Hillsborough Park, we decided to defer that installation or purchase of a Hillsborough Park. So again, a lot of money is budgeted for these projects, but we don't get to finish them. And hopefully, this combination of working two budgets at the same time might assist that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. And now, item 9, audit update, and the Betty show continues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is just to give the committee a update on where we're at with the audit. It came to my attention last week that it's actually October 15th is the timeline when the MGA requires us to be presenting the audited financial statements to council. And I somehow was thinking that was a little bit later than it is, so my apologies for not bringing that to council on time. I know I already knew that last year was late. I was surprised to go back and look over the last 4 years. We've been late every year. Sometimes it's later in October, sometimes it's actually the middle of November. I didn't go back far enough to see one in December, but I don't like to miss deadlines, so I am uncomfortable that this one got met. And I was surprised that the auditors or the actuaries didn't mention it, but it didn't come up. And when I talked to the auditor about it, I said, don't we usually aim for this? Because I didn't know about it. And his comment was, well, we try, but there's usually something holding us up, which apparently is often the actuarial reports. We didn't get them till November last year. We're hoping to get them this week so that we can move things along. And what we're trying to move towards is having the financial statements ready to deliver to a special meeting of council by the end of the month.
The end of October? Oh, you're quick. And will that include the management letter? Need that management letter.
Through the chair to Mayor Brown. Last year's management letter was dated December the 1st, so I would not necessarily expect it to be ready in October, but it will come to committee and council when we do get it. Just a question there, is that standard procedure that those management letters come to committee and council?
I can give you a little bit of history. So when I was on Finance Committee back in 2000, we'd get the management letter, and it might be one page. But as we moved along, those management letters became more robust, more information. And I know that some past chairs would say that past chairs of finance, that it's just for management. But council is, the board of directors, so they should have an opportunity to look at that management letter. And in the past, it has been in a closed session. I don't know if it has to require that. It does require that under our, go ahead. Can you?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're still looking at that. There seems to be some great debate about it being confidential. My experience is that management letters and the information contained have been shared with council. In my work experience, the intent is, and we're still making sure that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do in accordance with information being released. But as it stands right now, the intent is to have the management letters be public. When we do bring them publicly through council, the goal is that we have a plan when we bring it forward. So management letters are not to talk about how terrible the organization is or how things are mismanaged. The point is that all municipalities should always be in a process of continuous improvement. So the auditor's report is where if there was something financially going wrong at the city, it's through the auditor's report that something like that would get reported. The intent of the management report is to ensure that we've got best practices in place. So they're always going to bring up what those best practices are. And the intent is, as we go through this process, when the management letter comes, we will also come to say what the improvements are to be made in accordance with the management letter. Thanks.
Just for my own understanding, when we talk about this point on manager's report, am I to understand, I'm guessing that, is that a report that's authored by you, Betty? Okay.
It's,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's the auditors that give the management letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And, Mr. Chair, all we have to do is just go back to the BDO report. They talked about issues in the BDO that relate to procurement, capital projects, operational. So, yeah, it's a good step forward. And I agree with the CAO. The management letter is not a summative evaluation. It's a formative evaluation to give best practices, highlight those best practices. We may not be meeting them, but this is, the auditors, correct me if I'm wrong, going through the chair to the manager, highlights maybe those deficiencies, and hopefully they'll highlight the efficiencies that show our municipal government is in good hands and working very well. That's how I see the management letter. I don't see it as a private document. I see it as something that should be shared to the public.
Thank you, Betty. I think I'll go out on a limb and speak for the committee. I think we're understanding of meeting, not don't beat yourself up too bad and not meeting the deadline. I think we probably have all kinds of faith that this time next year you'll be in a different situation as you've indicated in the report, and the best of luck in getting it ready. Thank you. And just Betty, you extended this, so it's number 10, new business on the grant. You want to address the committee on the grant discussion that was at the council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just trying to pull something up here. Just one moment. Oh, I'm looking into the wrong person. Yes, I wanted to give some clarification from the grant bylaw that we did back in September, because there was discussion at last night's meeting about those couple of grants coming back to finance. And Wayne and I had a conversation about that at the time. He asked if they had to come to finance, and I went back and looked up what the bylaw said about that. And And it didn't actually require it to come to finance. What the bylaw said was grant applications will be reviewed by the relevant department and a recommendation will be made to council based on the evaluation of the application if necessary. So there was nothing in there that specifically said it had to come to finance. And since these applications were made to the Economic Development Department, I didn't see the need for them to come to finance, but of course, that's council's decision.
Yeah, and not, I guess my first thought on that is, I guess, why wouldn't it have maybe come in this case to economic development perhaps in the first place, but that, I don't know if that's a question for you or not, but anyway, that's,
Mr. Chair, sorry, can you clarify that question there? Why it didn't go to that committee to
no,
start with?
it came through finance, I guess, as, as a grant request, and then last night it came to council through economic development, and you're just clarifying the grant policy, saying that there's the flexibility for it to go to what's viewed as the most relevant department. Like in this case, it come back. It started in finance, but it came back to council last night through economic development, and I guess that was the question. And Councillor Durong, you have a comment or question on it?
Yeah, well, the concern to me was you come to finance for a grant, and then the finance committee debates it, talks about it, gives reasons why, and gives an answer, and then you go around another avenue, whether it be economic development or HR or whatever, and then come back again. It was just confusion on, I thought the committee would deal with the grants and then forward it on to council. I just didn't think it should have went to committee first and then try other places. That's the clarification that I wasn't aware of, or didn't see how it could do that.
Go ahead, Manager Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These two grant requests did go to that committee first. They didn't come to finance first, they went to that committee. They were new grant applications. So the first time they made the grant application, it went to economic development, and they wrote them up as new initiatives. And this was at budget time. They were new initiatives at budget time, and it was decided then that we wanted to have a new grant bylaw in place before we approved those. So we had a new grant bylaw. At budget time, we had
It's a new policy, not a new bylaw.
my apologies, I get bylaws and policies confused. So we put a block of money in, $500,000 was put in the budget for any of these new grants that we were going to look at after we had the new policy in place. And that whole $500,000 went into the finance budget. Maybe we should have split it with economic development, because they were first brought forward as new initiatives from economic development. But because we put the $500,000, it was all put into finance. In hindsight, it likely should have been split. But those grants went through that process. Those grants are now done. These are two new grants. They happen to be from organizations that have already put through grants, but there's nothing in the policy saying you can't ask for another grant. There's nothing in the policy that says grants have to all be applied for at the same time. It does give a November 30th deadline for grants that are going to be looked at as part of the upcoming budget process, but it does also allow for grant applications to be made throughout the year, and it does allow grants to come from other departments. It just says they need to be reviewed by the relevant department. And these were grant applications that the first time went to economic development, and then now the second time they've gone to economic development. So there's nothing in the current policy saying that they need to come through finance.
So just as you described that, I'm just wondering, is there, any, so we have, in this case, the two that we dealt with last night, second request in the same 12 months, right? Is there anything, yeah, and asking the question out loud on our policy, and I don't have it in front of me that forbids that?
So, Mr. Chair, there's nothing in the policy that says they cannot make a second request for a grant, and there's nothing in the policy
In the
that
same
allows
year.
for an appeal or anything, but there's nothing to say they cannot apply a second time. And we have a draft evaluation tool, a matrix that's been put together. It's come to this committee. It's gone back for reworking. We're still working on it. The plan is to bring it back to committee in November. But these two grants were both put through that matrix as well, and they scored highly on the matrix. I don't offhand know if there's something in the matrix specifically referring to when is, is this a second grant? Is this a new grant? I mean, we may need to look at putting something in the matrix to address whether it's a repeat request, and we may want to have that as part of the evaluation tool. It's not at the moment, but perhaps it's something that we need to look at adding.
Should the evaluation tool or the policy, or both? No. The idea of applying twice in the same year, should it be something that's addressed in your matrix and possibly your grant policy? But anyway,
Mr.
just
Chair, so I think that's a
CAO?
for the question for the committee. The very question of, should you be able to apply? Should one organization be able to apply twice in 1 year? That's the bigger and broader question, I think, of all of this. And if the answer is yes, then of course, in the matrix, it makes sense to plug something in there to evaluate that. But I think it starts with the original question. We put our we make our call for applications in October. November 30th, they have to get them all in, and then they get evaluated. And are we done for the year? Or if there's money left in the pot, is there flexibility for people to reapply? And depending on what you feel in that regard, the policy can be updated accordingly.
Councillor Drown?
Yeah, well, and that makes sense, but like I say, if you go out and say, okay, from October, it closes in November, you vet them all, you make a decision, and then, the people that don't get what they want, well, how many times can you come back? So I'm saying, if we get this in place and we deal with it in November or December, whenever we decide, or in budget time, and then it's over until the next year. It just seems that if anybody gets wind of somebody else coming back and you didn't get what you wanted the first time around, then you would reapply again. So to me, it just seems that, you're coming back time and time until you get what you want, right?
Mr. Chair,
you.
just following up with Councillor Duran. So we have a policy, grants policy, and we have a grants bylaw. So what overrides what? I thought the bylaw, like it's in our bylaws. We have grants bylaw going back to 2018. So again, we have a policy, we have a bylaw. To me, the bylaw overrides the policy. If you look at the policy, I think it's not as defined as it is in the policy. It's not as defined as what we have in the grants policy. And the reason I bring that up is that all you have to do is just go to your bylaws and then go to your everyone drive, and you'll get the policies under finance. So we have a policy for grants, and we have a grants bylaw. And I did bring this up when we were discussing it. And I thought it was everything was going to be incorporated into the bylaw. So the policy doesn't dictate what's in the bylaw. We follow the bylaws. And the bylaw is not as expressive as the manager has stated, which I appreciate her knowledge about the policy, because I'm sure she wrote it up. But on a second point, Councillor Duran, we did set ourselves up. We put $500,000 to the side, right? Became open game. And I remember, you recall, let's either expend it or find somewhere else to put it. No, we parked it. So everybody knows that envelope of 500, started off at 500,000, is parked there. So I can see why organizations are coming after us, Mr. Chair. But, Mr. Chair, I think we're coming to the end, right, of our fiscal year. Like, we have to move on with this. Like, how many times have we have to kick this can down the road?
Thank you, Mayor. Manager Betty?
So to clarify, there is both a policy and a bylaw, and both were updated this year, and they are meant to be complementary. The bylaw does not address that particular piece. The policy has more details on it.
But neither talk about two in the 1 year, correct?
It doesn't say anything about it not being allowed.
So,
And it doesn't, we have an application deadline, and it specifically says, requester must submit a written request by November 30th of the year for the following fiscal. And then the next point is, requests for support will be considered on an ongoing basis. So it does open it up that people can make requests throughout the year.
Is that the policy or the bylaw?
That's the policy.
The bylaw doesn't say that.
The bylaw,
Bylaw is very general.
the bylaw was intended to be general, and then the more detailed specifics are in the policy.
But if you look at our grants bylaw, does it make reference to the policy?
Yes?
Under what section?
I think it says that. This is the bylaw or the policy you're asking about?
Bylaw.
The policy specifically refers to the bylaw, and the bylaw,
I see definitions, I see application, general, name of grant, Prince. Reporting, criteria. I went through it now, I could have missed it.
no, it doesn't.
What? And 5.2,
5.2 of the bylaw.
each grant may be established by a way of written policy adopted by council.
I'm not seeing a 5.2.
Yep, 5.2 first sentence.
5.2 of the bylaw?
Yep,
The sentence the mayor just read.
that's the one that's on our webpage, charlottetown.ca.
Maybe that's an outdated one. Does that have 2023 at the top of it?
No, I think it's 2018, that's, we're outdated.
The old one.
So we did update the bylaw?
It was updated, this is adopted June 12th, 2023.
By council? Okay. Okay,
Bylaw 2023 GB 01.
yeah, but I'm referencing what's on our website. Website doesn't have that updated. That's where I go.
I went to our Everyone Drive.
Can,
So the policy is what gives further detail. And it does, so after it talks about, like in the same section of application deadlines, it also refers 9.4 in the policy, support granted for previous years will not be a factor in consideration, and each application will be reviewed on its own merit. So that's talking about previous years, not just previous grant applications, but the inference is that each application will be reviewed on its own merit. So based on this, I would interpret that as being each grant is looked at its own merit. So if the same organization applies multiple times, each time we'd be looking at the criteria and whether they meet the criteria or not each time.
Yeah.
I just to close on this for today, is it possible, and CAO Eleanor direction on a takeaway to more discussion around what, again, I know we just updated our bylaw, but I think it's an important enough piece, in my personal opinion, on how committee feels that there should be language in there to not be dealing with two requests in the same year. Just my own personal thought on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think we can come back with recommendations with that in mind then to eliminate multiple applications in 1 year. And it's perfectly normal. Once you implement a bylaw and a policy, sometimes you figure, oh, there's a gap that we didn't anticipate. So to come back and amend accordingly is perfectly normal, and we can do that. And we will endeavor to do that prior to budget really getting underway, so it's
Oh,
extra.
that'd be great. Thank you for that, then,
So, Mr. Chair, so
Mayor Brown?
where do we go? And again, if memory serves me correct or serves me right, I thought we agreed when we were going through the budget process that we would increase the funding to the Guild to support any CPI increases, and we said no to the other request, and we said no to the request from Ann and Gilbert. So how did they come back as we parked them? I didn't think we parked them. Am I wrong, Mr. Chair or Councillor Drummond? We didn't park them. We made a decision, CPI increase, check that box off, and NO to Earth's, to the, to Ann and Gilbert. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so why is it back?
Through the chair.
CAO?
Through the chair to your worship. It was indicated that there was new information in your current policy. Right now, it allows you to come back multiple times. So these two applications that have come in are within policy. So I would recommend that they be considered in accordance with the policy as it stands right now. And then moves are made to amend accordingly based on our conversation today.
So they moved to council, correct? Is that what we're getting, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Yes, based on the discussion and the understanding, yes, because nothing in the policy to, or bylaw to suggest otherwise. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. So moved. Seconded. Thank you.